Arav had everything: a thriving business, wealth beyond imagination, and a life people envied. But the one thing he did not have was time for his father. Years ago, after his mother's death, his father, Ravi, had remarried a woman named Lata. Arav had never trusted her, but he was too focused on building his empire to care. Welcome back to my channel. If you love shocking and emotional stories, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let us dive into today's unbelievable story. One evening, Arav drove to Lata's mansion for what he thought was a routine visit, but what he saw through the large glass windows made his heart stop. His father, once a proud and dignified man, was on his knees, scrubbing the floor. His back was bent, his hands trembling, and worst of all, silent tears streaked his wrinkled face. Above him, Lata stood tall, her arms crossed, watching like a queen overseeing a mere servant. Arav's blood boiled. His father, his own flesh and blood, reduced to a servant? How had this happened? Why had his father never told him? He clenched his fists, feeling a rage unlike anything before. But he knew one thing: he would get to the bottom of this, and someone was going to pay. Arav pushed the door open without knocking, his heart pounding in his chest. His stepmother turned, startled by the sudden intrusion. But before she could speak, Arav's sharp gaze landed on his father. The old man flinched, quickly wiping his face with his sleeve as if trying to erase the humiliation. "Lata!" Arav's voice was like ice, controlled but deadly. "What is my father doing?" Lata smirked, crossing her arms as if she was amused by his outrage. "What does it look like? He is doing what he is supposed to, earning his stay." Arav's jaw tightened. "Earning his stay? He is your husband, not a servant." Ravi's frail voice cut through the tension. "Arav, my son, it is all right. I do not mind." "You do not mind?" Arav snapped, his eyes blazing. He turned to Lata. "How long has this been going on?" Lata's smirk never wavered. "Since the day we got married," she said casually. "He wanted to stay, but I do not provide free meals. He works, or he leaves." Arav felt something dark and dangerous coil inside him. His father, a man who had given everything for his family, had been treated like this for years, and he never told him. But why? What was he hiding? His father looked away, shame clouding his face. "Arav, please, let it go." But Arav was done letting things go. He was going to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. Arav took a deep breath, trying to suppress the fury raging inside him. He turned to his father, his voice softening. "Why did you never tell me, Papa? Why did you suffer in silence?" Ravi lowered his head, his frail hands gripping the damp cloth he had been using to scrub the floor. His silence spoke volumes, but Arav was not going to let it go this time. He crouched down beside his father, placing a firm yet gentle hand on his shoulder. "Tell me the truth." Lata let out a mocking chuckle. "Truth? You want the truth, Arav? Your father is weak. He chose to stay because he has nowhere else to go. He is old, useless, and this is what old, useless men do: clean and earn their meals." Arav stood up so fast that the chair beside him toppled over. His furious glare burned into his stepmother. "You call my father useless? The man who raised me, who sacrificed everything for me, who worked his entire life to give me the best future. He is useless." His voice was dangerously low, but the rage behind it was undeniable. Lata's smirk wavered for the first time, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, please, Arav, do not act so righteous. You never cared to check on him all these years. You were too busy playing the successful millionaire while he wasted away in this house." Arav's breath caught in his throat. Her words were like knives, slicing through him with brutal truth. Had he really abandoned his father? Had he been so blinded by his success that he failed to see his father's suffering? He looked at Ravi again, searching his tired, sunken eyes for an answer. "Papa, why did you not come to me?" Ravi hesitated, his fingers twisting the edge of his shirt. Because I did not want to be a burden, Beta. You were building your empire. You had no time for an old man like me. Arav felt like the ground beneath him had shattered. His father thought he was a burden? He clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. This was not just about Lada's cruelty. This was about years of neglect, of distance, of unsaid words that had pushed his father into this misery. But no more. Arav turned back to Lada, his voice laced with cold determination. You will regret this. Lada scoffed, flipping her hair. And what will you do, Arav? Take him away? Go ahead. But let me warn you, he is hiding something from you. Something that might change everything you think you know about him. Arav narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Lada leaned in slightly, her lips curling into a sinister smile. Ask him why he really stayed. Ask him what he did years ago that forced him to live like this. Arav turned to his father, but Ravi looked away, his face filled with shame. Arav's heart pounded. What was his father hiding? Arav's mind raced. He had come here expecting a simple visit, but now he stood in the middle of a storm he never saw coming. His father was suffering. His stepmother was reveling in his misery. And worst of all, there was a hidden truth, one that even his father seemed terrified to reveal. Papa, Arav said firmly, stepping closer. What is she talking about? What did you do? Ravi's hands trembled as he clutched his worn-out shirt. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but then he shut his mouth, shaking his head. It is nothing, Beta. Just let it go. Let it go, Arav repeated, his frustration rising. I just found you scrubbing floors like a servant in your own home, and now I find out there is more to this? I need the truth, Papa. What are you hiding from me? Lada let out a dramatic sigh. Oh, Arav, you are so naive. You think your father is some poor, innocent man? He chose this life. He accepted this humiliation. And do you know why? She stepped forward, lowering her voice to a taunting whisper. Because if he left, his biggest secret would come out, a secret that could ruin him in your eyes, forever. Arav's heart pounded against his ribs. His father had been many things, kind, hard-working, a man of integrity. What could he possibly have done that was so terrible? He turned to his father once more. Papa, whatever it is, I can handle it, but I need to hear it from you. Ravi finally looked up. His eyes glistened with unshed tears, and his voice cracked as he whispered, I did it for you, Arav. Everything I did, it was for you. Arav swallowed hard. Did what? Ravi closed his eyes, as if reliving a painful memory. When he opened them again, his next words sent chills down Arav's spine. I stole money, Beta. A lot of it. And if the truth comes out, I could lose everything, including you. Arav froze, his world tilted. His father, a thief? The man who raised him with such strong morals, who taught him the value of hard work, had stolen money. It did not make sense. His voice was barely above a whisper. What money, Papa? From where? Ravi let out a shaky breath. From your mother's inheritance. Arav felt the air leave his lungs. His mother's money. The wealth she had left behind for him. His chest tightened. His mind reeled with questions. But one thing was clear. This was not just about his father's suffering. This was about a betrayal that had been buried for years, waiting to be uncovered. And Arav was about to dig up a truth that could change everything. Arav felt like the walls around him were closing in. His father's words echoed in his head. He had stolen from his own wife's inheritance, the money that should have been Arav's future. His fists clenched involuntarily. You stole my mother's money? Arav's voice was low, trembling with a mixture of shock and fury. Why, Papa? Why would you do that? Ravi's face crumpled, his shoulders shaking as silent tears escaped his tired eyes. Because I was desperate, Beta. I thought I was protecting you. Arav took a step back, shaking his head. Protecting me? By taking what was rightfully mine? By forcing yourself into this life of misery? Tell me the truth, Papa. No more lies. Ravi inhaled sharply, as if gathering the courage to bare his soul. After your mother passed away, I was drowning in debt. The business was failing. People were after me, and I had no way out. The only thing left was the money she had set aside for you. I told myself I would only borrow a little, just enough to save us. But you took all of it. Arav's voice was eerily calm, but his fingers dug into his palms. Ravi nodded slowly, shame covering his face like a shadow. Yes, I kept taking, thinking I could fix things, that I would put it back once I rebuilt the business. But things got worse. I lost everything, and by the time I realized what I had done, the money was gone. Arav's breath was shallow. His entire life he had believed his success was built on his own hard work. Now he was finding out that his father had gambled away his mother's last gift to him. Lotta, who had been silently watching, let out a laugh. There it is. The perfect father is not so perfect after all. You see, Arav? He is nothing but a broken man, living under my roof because he has nowhere else to go. And the best part? He stayed because I know his secret. If he'd left, I would have told you long ago. Arav's jaw tightened as he turned to his stepmother, his eyes burning with fury. You used this against him? You humiliated him just because you could? Lotta smirked. Of course, it was fun watching him suffer. Arav's rage was unlike anything he had ever felt. But more than anger, there was pain. Deep, gut-wrenching pain. His father had made mistakes, but he had paid for them with years of humiliation. And Lotta, she had enjoyed every second of it. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. You may have enjoyed this, Lotta, but your fun ends today. Lotta raised an eyebrow. And what exactly do you plan to do, Arav? Arav's lips curled into a dangerous smirk. Watch and find out. Arav's mind was made up. He had spent his whole life believing in justice, in fairness, in hard work. But now, standing in front of his broken father and a stepmother who reveled in cruelty, he realized some battles were not won with patience. Some had to be fought head-on. He pulled out his phone, and without breaking eye contact with Lotta, dialed a number. The call was picked up within seconds. Raj, I need you to dig up every single financial record under Lotta's name. Bank accounts, investments, properties, everything. I want it in 10 minutes. Lotta's smirk faded. What do you think you are doing? Arav crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. Fixing this mess. Lotta scoffed, but there was unease in her eyes. You think you can just walk in here and turn the tables? I own this house. Your father. He belongs here, cleaning my floors. He is pathetic. Arav turned to his father, who was watching him with tired eyes, his hands still gripping the rag he had been using to clean the floors. Something inside Arav cracked. His father had once been a strong man, a proud man. But years of guilt and humiliation had drained him. Not anymore, Arav said firmly. He is coming with me. Lotta laughed coldly. And where will he go? You might be rich, Arav, but he has nothing. The moment he steps out of this house, he will be a nobody. Arav's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. Raj had sent him the files. He opened them and scanned through the records, his jaw tightening. Lotta, he said slowly, lifting his gaze. You are right. You own this house. But do you know what else you own? He took a step closer, holding up his phone. A mountain of illegal transactions, tax fraud, stolen assets. Should I go on? Lotta's smirk vanished completely. What are you talking about? Arav turned the screen toward her. These records show that you have been laundering money through fake companies. And guess what? That is a serious crime. He tilted his head. So tell me, Lotta, how long do you think you will last before the authorities come knocking? Lotta's face turned pale. You are bluffing. Arav smiled. A cold, ruthless smile. Am I? He pressed another button on his phone. I just sent these files to my lawyer. In an hour, your accounts will be frozen. By tomorrow, the police will be investigating every single asset you have. Lada staggered back, gripping the edge of the dining table. You cannot do this. Arav stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. You ruined my father. You humiliated him. You took everything from him. Now it is your turn to lose. Lata's lips trembled, her confident facade cracking. What do you want? Arav's gaze darkened. Simple. You will sign over this house to my father, right now. He pulled a legal document from his pocket, one his team had already prepared. Or, you can prepare for jail. Lada's hands shook as she stared at the paper. She was trapped. Arav had taken away her power in mere minutes. Arav turned to his father. Papa, you do not have to suffer anymore. This is your home now. Tears welled in Ravi's eyes, but before he could speak, Lada grabbed the pen with trembling fingers. Fine, she spat. I will sign it. Arav watched as she scrawled her name on the document, sealing her fate. The moment she finished, he snatched the paper away. Now, he said, his voice dripping with finality. Get out. Lada's eyes widened. What? You heard me, Arav said. This is no longer your home. Pack your things and leave. Lada's breath hitched. She had spent years tormenting Ravi, believing she was untouchable. But in mere minutes, she had lost everything. She turned to Ravi desperately. You cannot let him do this! But Ravi, for the first time in years, lifted his head and spoke with quiet strength. You threw me away like trash, Lada. Now it is your turn to walk away with nothing. Lada's mouth opened, then closed. She knew there was nothing left to say. Arav watched her, unflinching. You have 1 hour. After that, if I find you here, I will make sure you regret it. Lada's face burned with fury, but she had no choice. Defeated, she stormed toward the stairs to pack her belongings. Arav finally turned back to his father, his voice softening. It is over, Papa. You are free. But Ravi's face was still troubled. He looked down, his hands trembling. There is one more thing, Beta, he whispered. Something you do not know. Arav's heart clenched. What now? Arav's chest tightened at his father's words. He had just taken down Lata, reclaimed his father's dignity, and thought the nightmare was over. But the look in Ravi's eyes said otherwise. What do you mean, Papa? Arav asked, his voice cautious. What else is there? Ravi swallowed hard, his hands gripping the armrest of the chair as if he were gathering every ounce of strength to speak. His gaze flickered to Lata, who was stomping upstairs, throwing clothes into a suitcase with furious movements. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. Lata is not just cruel, Arav. She is dangerous. She has been hiding something. Something much worse than her crimes. Arav's stomach dropped. He had already uncovered her fraudulent activities, humiliated her, and thrown her out of the house. What more could there be? What is it, Papa? Arav demanded, his pulse quickening. Ravi inhaled deeply, his voice shaking. Your mother's death. It was not an accident. Arav froze. For years he had believed that his mother had died in a tragic accident, slipping down the stairs on a rainy evening, a fatal injury that had taken her away from him forever. But now, hearing his father's words, something inside him shattered. His breath came in short gasps. Papa! What are you saying? Ravi's eyes were filled with unshed tears. I was a fool, Beta. I did not want to see the truth. I was blind in my grief, in my guilt. But I know now. Lata had a hand in it. Your mother did not just fall. She was pushed. Arav felt the ground beneath him shift. His fingers twitched, his entire body going numb with shock. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Lata. The name left his lips like venom. Ravi nodded, his voice breaking. She was always jealous of your mother. She wanted my wealth, my status. She wanted me. And when your mother refused to let her get close to our family, she got rid of her. I did not have proof back then, and Ravi choked back a sob, pain deep in his eyes. I let her stay in my life because I was too weak to fight back. Arav felt white-hot rage bubble up inside him, more powerful than anything he had ever felt before. He turned sharply toward the staircase, where Lada was still packing, oblivious to the storm about to hit her. "She killed my mother," Arav whispered, his hands curling into fists. "And she thought she could get away with it?" He moved before he could think, his feet carrying him up the stairs, his vision red with fury. He grabbed the suitcase from Lada's hands and threw it across the room, sending her belongings scattering across the floor. Lada spun around, her eyes widening in shock. "Arav, what the—" "You murdered my mother," Arav said, his voice dangerously low, his entire body trembling with rage. "Did you really think I would not find out?" Lada's expression faltered, just for a second, before she quickly regained her composure. "I do not know what nonsense your father has been telling you, but—" "Shut up!" Arav roared, his voice shaking the walls. "You lied! You stole! You tortured my father! But now I know the truth! You are a murderer!" Lada backed away, her confidence finally cracking. "You have no proof." Arav let out a dark laugh, his jaw clenching. "You think I need proof? You think the world needs proof when a man like me speaks? The police will believe me. The courts will believe me. I will make sure you spend the rest of your miserable life rotting in a cell." Lada's breath hitched. You cannot do this." Arav took a step closer, his voice a dangerous whisper. "Watch me." Just then, there was a loud knock on the door. Arav turned, his pulse racing. Outside, standing in crisp uniforms, were two police officers. "Arav Malhotra," one of them asked. "We need to speak with you about an anonymous tip regarding a murder that took place in this house years ago." Lada gasped, her face turning ghostly pale. Arav slowly turned back to her, his lips curling into a smirk. "Looks like your past has finally caught up with you." Lada's legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the bed, trembling. Arav stepped aside, allowing the officers to enter. "Arrest her," he said coldly, "for the murder of my mother." The officers did not hesitate. Within seconds, Lada was yanked to her feet, handcuffs clicking around her wrists. She struggled, but it was useless. "You will regret this, Arav," she screamed as they dragged her toward the door. "You will pay for this." Arav did not flinch. He simply watched as she was taken away, her screams fading into the distance. His mother had finally gotten justice. His father was finally free. But something inside Arav still felt unsettled, as if there was still one last secret left to uncover. As the echoes of Lada's screams faded into the night, silence settled over the house like a heavy fog. Ravi sat in his chair, staring at the empty space where Lada had once stood, his face a mixture of relief and deep sorrow. Arav stood by the window, his jaw clenched, watching as the police car carrying his stepmother disappeared down the road. It should have felt like victory. Justice had been served. His mother's murderer was finally behind bars. His father was no longer living as a broken man, forced to clean up after a woman who had ruined his life. But then why did Arav feel a strange weight pressing down on his chest? Something was still missing. He turned back to his father. "Papa, how did the police know?" Ravi blinked, as if pulled from a trance. "What do you mean?" Arav narrowed his eyes. "You said you never had proof, that you had been too weak to fight back, but someone called the police and reported the murder. Who was it?" Ravi's brows furrowed. I do not know." A chill ran down Arav's spine. He had assumed it was his father, or maybe even himself in his fit of rage, but now it was clear. Someone else had tipped off the police. Someone who had been watching. Someone who knew the truth. Just as Arav was about to question it further, a knock at the door made them both jump. His heart pounded. Who could it be at this hour? He strode toward the entrance, his mind racing with possibilities. As he pulled the door open, his breath caught in his throat. Standing there, shrouded in the dim light of the porch, was a woman. A woman who looked eerily familiar. Arav's pulse thundered in his ears. He felt as if he were looking at a ghost. She was older now, with faint lines on her face, but her features were unmistakable, the same soft eyes, the same gentle curve of her lips. And then she spoke. Arav. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Arav took a step back, his hands shaking. This cannot be possible. Ravi, who had followed him to the door, gasped, clutching his chest. No, it cannot be. The woman stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. It has been a long time. Arav could not breathe, could not think, could not move, because the woman standing before him was his mother. Arav's vision blurred as he staggered backward, gripping the doorframe for support. His mother, whom he had mourned for years, whom he had believed to be dead, stood before him, very much alive. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Ma. The word barely left his lips, as if saying it would shatter the fragile reality before him. Ravi collapsed onto the couch, his hands trembling as he covered his mouth, his eyes filled with disbelief and overwhelming emotion. This is not possible. I saw you die. His voice cracked, unable to finish. Tears welled up in the woman's eyes as she stepped inside, her body frail yet holding the weight of untold suffering. I know, she whispered, and I am so sorry for everything you both went through. Arav's chest heaved, anger and confusion colliding in a violent storm inside him. Then explain, Ma. His voice was raw, almost desperate. Explain how you are alive when we buried you. Explain how you let us suffer while believing you were gone. His mother flinched, but she did not look away. She knew he deserved the truth. It was Lada, she began, her voice shaking. She tried to kill me that night. She pushed me down the stairs just like your father feared. But I did not die. Arav clenched his fists, his entire body rigid. Then where have you been all these years? She looked at Ravi, her eyes filling with unshed tears. That night, after I fell, I was barely alive. The doctors told Lada I might survive, and she could not let that happen. She bribed the hospital staff and had me declared dead. They smuggled me out of the hospital before you could see me. When I woke up, I was locked in a small house on the outskirts of the city, guarded day and night. Arav's stomach churned with rage. He could barely comprehend the level of cruelty Lada had inflicted on his family. His mother continued, her voice heavy with pain. She kept me prisoner for years, making sure I could never return, never tell the truth. I was weak, recovering from my injuries, and she used that time to manipulate your father, to steal everything. She threatened to harm you if I ever tried to escape. Arav's breath came in sharp gasps, his mind reeling. Then how did you escape now? Her lips quivered, and she wiped away a tear. Someone helped me. A kind nurse who used to work at the hospital recognized me. She told me Lada had been arrested. That was my chance. I ran. I came straight here. Ravi broke down in sobs, his shoulders shaking as he reached for his wife's hands. I failed you. I let her control me. I let her take everything from us. If only I had known. She knelt in front of him, cradling his face with her frail hands. No, my love. You were as much a victim as I was. We lost time, but we are together now. Arav stood frozen, staring at them. He had spent years believing his mother was gone. He had spent years carrying that grief, and now she was here. But with that relief came a fire, an uncontrollable, raging inferno inside him. Lata had not just stolen their wealth, she had stolen their lives, and he was not done with her yet. Arav's eyes darkened with determination. Lata is going to pay for everything, not just for her fraud, not just for how she treated Papa, but for this. For you. His mother shook her head, holding his arm. Arav, she is already in prison. It is not enough. His voice was cold. I will make sure she never sees another day of peace. I will take everything she ever loved, and I will make sure she spends the rest of her life regretting the day she ever laid hands on this family. His mother and father exchanged worried glances, but Arav had already made up his mind. Lata's punishment had only just begun. Arav's heart pounded like a war drum. The revelation of his mother's survival had turned his grief into a blazing fury, a thirst for justice that could not be ignored. Lata had taken everything from them: his father's dignity, his mother's life, his own childhood. And now she would face the full force of the consequences. The very next morning, Arav wasted no time. He called his most powerful legal team, ensuring that every crime Lata had committed, from financial fraud to attempted murder, was brought to light. He pulled every business string he had, making sure her assets were frozen, her connections severed, and any allies she had abandoned her in disgrace. By noon, he stood outside the prison gates, watching as Lata was dragged to the visitors' area. Her once proud, haughty face was now pale and hollow, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had spent her life controlling others, but now she was nothing more than a powerless prisoner. She opened her mouth to speak, but Arav raised a hand, his expression cold as steel. "Do not say a word. You do not deserve to." Lata swallowed hard, sensing the shift in power. "Arav, listen, You are finished." His voice was calm, but there was a deadly finality to it. "Every penny you stole, every lie you told, every crime you committed, I have ensured you will never escape them. The world knows who you truly are now. You will rot in this cell, forgotten and alone, the way you left my mother for years." Lata's lips trembled, but she had nothing left to bargain with. She had lost. Arav turned away without another glance. She was no longer worth his time. Back at home, he found his mother and father sitting on the porch, holding hands as the afternoon sun cast a golden glow over them. It was a sight he never thought he would see again. His mother smiled up at him. "It is over?" Arav nodded. "She will never harm us again." Tears of relief shimmered in her eyes. "Then let us stop living in the past. We have lost enough time already." Arav exhaled, feeling a weight he had carried for years finally lift from his chest. He had fought for justice, but now it was time to fight for happiness. As he sat beside his parents, the pain of the past did not disappear, but for the first time, it no longer controlled him. His family was whole again, and that was worth more than all the wealth in the world.